Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Boss versus Coach. Uh, Thanks once more for your continuous support and motivation. Uh, we are progressing well, and I think that the credit goes to all of you for putting across your ideas, your support, and your thoughts, and aligning it to the theme of Boss versus Coach. Uh, in last few videos, we have discussed about the concept of psychological safety. We have tried to bring in the leader's perspective, and in recent video we have also covered the perspective of a coaching. But there is a lot which needs to be discussed, and there's a lot which a leader has to deliver beyond psychological safety. And to do that, we have a very special guest tonight. Olivia, what's your thought on that?
My thought is it is very exciting, Mohit. So yeah, having covered the subject matter from a few different perspectives, we thought having a senior leader, a leader of leaders, if you will, would be a really interesting other approach. So absolutely delighted today to have Francesca Lagerberg with us. And Francesca is the global CEO of the network of professional services firms. So literally the CEO who supports CEOs who support their firms. So a really interesting background. So Fran, I'd like to welcome you to our screen. And I happen to know
Welcome, friend.
that
Hi.
Francesca has been a qualified coach for some 15 years. So is definitely got the coaching style under her belt. As well as having been in publishing, worked in the people and culture leadership space, and her most beloved space of tax, which we can't start her talking about because it'll be very hard to stop her talking about tax. She does love it. So, Fran, welcome to our space. And I just thought, before we go into the psychological safety piece, here we are talking about the shift of a leader from a boss to a coach. What are your thoughts on that as a basis?
I actually love thinking about boss versus coach, because when I look at perhaps what's been the biggest, largest, most exciting shift that you've seen in our leadership space in professional service firms, but in other areas as well, it has been people stop using a hierarchical command and control approach to life and becoming more of a coach, listening in a different way, but also helping people reach their full potential in a different way. So if I look at how coaching can transform a business, can transform leadership, it's a very, very empowering tool and deceptively simple, but actually does require a little bit of work.
Certainly does. So when we were talking a little while ago, when we were talking about maybe you coming on this show, we were talking about how it isn't just the junior people who sometimes need help finding their voice. And you actually told me a story about quite a senior person who found it difficult in meetings to sort of step up and be heard. What do you think leaders can do to help people to speak up, to be heard?
Yeah, it certainly isn't something peculiar to people who perhaps feel a little bit less experienced. I think you've got very senior people who almost want to have permission to speak, because they may feel a little bit that that's not quite their place. Maybe that's because of their culture, maybe it's because of the environment that they've been in, and they like to be brought into the conversation. So as long as you're not putting someone on the spot where they're wildly uncomfortable, sometimes just getting that opportunity, here's a space for you to speak to, here's an opportunity for you to bring your voice into the room, that can be incredibly helpful. I think we've all sat in meetings where you've gone, I wonder what those three people over there thought about this meeting, and they never felt able to come into it. I think the other ability to be brought into a conversation where they're not being expected to know everything, but respected for giving a view.
No, thank you. We had a really interesting conversation, didn't we, Mohit, with a couple of less experienced people. We were talking about saying no and also saying yes. And we got into a really interesting space about people saying yes to everything and maybe not knowing how to set or maintain their boundaries and sort of speak up and say, sometimes I can't do something, and sometimes I keep saying yes and I really don't want to keep working because I'm killing myself. Any thoughts on how, as a leader, you can help people kind of set and maintain their boundaries?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two boundaries in play here. There's the personal boundary of I feel really uncomfortable about this and I actually don't want to do it, but I'm a little bit nervous about saying no. And then there's the piece where you sort of don't even know what the right answer is. So you kind of go, yeah, I'll give that a go. And then realize that was a terrible, terrible error of judgment and shouldn't have got involved. So I think there's a bit about when you are just really want to say no, but actually feel it's very difficult to turn that down, be that an opportunity, be because you know that your person you're reporting to wants you to do that, or actually you're sitting there at the top of the tree and you're going, I really should know how to do this. So I'm going to say yes, even though I really should be saying no. So there's a piece there that's partly about being comfortable with actually finding a middle ground, because actually sometimes you don't have to say yes or no. You can reflect on it, you can think about it, you can say, oh, I'll take that into consideration. You can do that very British thing of going, maybe. There's so many other ways that you can just buy yourself a bit of space to work out whether it's something you really want to do. Being put on the spot is very difficult for most people. Having to give that yes, no answer, often the temptation is just to go yes because you think it's the right thing to do, even if you're the wrong person to do it, or you haven't got the skill set to do it, or actually you really, really, really don't want to do it. I think the more difficult piece sometimes is when you know the expectation is all about you saying yes. It's kind of almost been decided that you're going to take on this role. And occasionally you have to do those things you really don't want to do, but then that doesn't need to be a full scale. Yes, it could be, well, I can help in this part of the project, but actually what you need is this. So I think there is a piece around breaking it down sometimes when you've got a bigger ticket area that you just know that saying yes is not the right thing to do. And also the great joy of follow-up conversations. Why is it that they want you to say yes? What is it that's actually in their mind? Why they asked you? What is it that they're really looking for? Is there a conversation you can have after that that enables you to kind of put the parameters around it? In the heat of battle in a room, it's much easier sometimes to go, yeah, I'll do it. And then it's much better sometimes to go, well, I'd like to have that reflection and then begin to find out a bit more about it. So I think buying time is never a bad thing to really understand what the yes involves, but also about the fact that sometimes a very straightforward yes, no answer isn't the right answer for that particular role.
Great. Mohit, you're doing lots of nodding. I'm curious to know what specifically is lighting you up.
Absolutely. So that's very interesting to hear the perspective from Francesca. But I have a doubt here. I often see leaders talking about psychological safety, and they, in their talks, in their speech, in their address to these larger teams, they always motivate them to speak up, speak their truth, to stand up and say no to the situations they are comfortable with. But on the practical side, my experience has been that the leaders are actually not prepared to accept no. They behave very differently, and they often create situations where they put you in such a tight room that they don't leave you with much of an opportunity to say no. So is it that the leader's mindset is not matured, or their appetite is still not that big to digest a no, or to see someone challenging them to what they wish to get done? What's your take on this?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's probably a multifaceted answer to that. I think there's, depending on what the situation is, sometimes the commercial demand of getting a job done means that everything kind of gets lost in the mix. We just got to get it done. And so I need you to do it because there's no one else to do it. Or I'm sure you're the right person to do it. So can you just do it? And that is commerce driving the end result. And I think that sometimes is because the leader is so keen to get the job done. They know it's got time pressure. They know that they're going to be judged by it as well. It almost overrides everything else. Psychological safety, which obviously is enormously important. Sometimes it's a lot easier to create that environment when you have peace and quiet and time to reflect. Sometimes in the heat, things get treated a little bit differently. Is it about maturity of the leader? I think sometimes it's the leader themselves has perhaps not been able to have the yes-no conversation themselves. They've often been landed with doing something or delivering in an impossible time frame or doing something for a client that is really, really hard to do at the timescale that's available. So they've almost been put into a hole and they've gone yes, and they're putting the people beneath them into that same hole because they're already on a journey that they perhaps rather wish they hadn't started. So sometimes it's just the reality of life that you've got you into that scenario. But again, taking a beat can be incredibly helpful in those high pressure environments. Are there other ways we can do this? Is that timescale realistic? What about the quality? Are we able to really deliver? It's all those great questions that then become a lot easier to unpack what it is we're trying to do and why we're going to do it. The race to yes, no is often driven by a whole bunch of pressures that sometimes can be slightly slowed down. It's a bit like skiing down a mountain at 100 miles an hour. Sometimes you do need to slalom a little bit to make sure you get down there safely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just picking up on the humanity of leaders, actually. It's easy to sit there going, well, leaders should do this and leaders should do that, and they need to be these almost perfect role model, but they're going through pressure and they're human too. So like you say, we're not looking at superheroes, we're looking at people who are doing the best that they can too. So maybe there's something about how organizations can support the leaders in learning how to slow down, how to be more temperate.
I think that's right. And I think there's something interesting there about sometimes for a leader, it's actually quite helpful for people to go, you know what, this is really going to be tough. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but there are some real blockers here. Collectively, can we do something to make this a little bit more reasonable? And sometimes the leader's going, thank God someone has said that. Because actually, I've been thinking about that. I know we've promised to do this, but that might give the comfort to everybody that there are other ways usually of doing things, or there's a conversation that needs to be had about the impossibility of the task.
Yeah. And Francesca, how much of this has to do with the growth mindset of the leaders? Because one of the reasons where I see that you must have seen the recent news of people not being able to succumb to the pressure of the job or the environment they have been put in, and they have end up losing on their lives, which is very unfortunate. While those must be great firms, they must be having those principles, the policies, the psychological safety, everything in place, but still there was a gap. So how much is it to do with the growth mindset of a leader, where they allow you to grow by challenging themselves, by where they allow you your space, and they also in a way nurture you to become a leader in turn? So how much is of you think is to deal with that growth mindset?
Yeah, growth mindset is sort of a way of being, isn't it? And I think it's a hugely valuable way of being. That ability to think openly, to ask questions, to take things through that kind of thinking process is hugely valuable. But when you look at some of those high pressure environments, and we've all been in them, everybody's had those situations where things just feel like they're careering along at a pace that is neither sustainable nor necessarily coming out to the right outcome. It's often very hard to stop. You get in an environment where actually, I'm going to get done. I remember way back in the midst of the time when I was starting off in my professional career, we'd pull all-nighters to get the job done. We'd do sort of crazy hours. We'd work extraordinary amounts of time. How effective and productive we were, I'm a little bit dubious as to how good we were after we've had 15 hours of full-on work with like half a sandwich. But there's sort of a piece there around sometimes you have to have the ability to have a stop. You need to have a leader who's comfortable with saying, you know what, we've done the best we can at the moment. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to make sure we're doing a really good job as well as just getting the job done. And that isn't necessarily always a growth mindset. I think it's about humanity again. Perhaps come back to your point, Olivia, is that nobody is able to continually work at that level and that pressure. Sometimes it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you should do it. But do you do it all the time? No one can do that. And that's where you see burnout, high stress, people who go, no, I can do it for this period of time. And then they give up on the whole job, the profession, the way of life, because it's just unsustainable. So you need to find something in there. I think a lot of people in our profession love a goal, love an aim, love getting an objective done. It's quite a kick. It's got quite a buzz to it. So that often isn't the issue, but doing that all the time can actually be an incredibly stressful environment, and many people crumble under that because you can't do it constantly.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, actually, the role modeling of the leader. I remember I worked in a firm quite some time ago where actually the leader on a deals team was very clear that he was watching the hours that people were doing, the input they were doing, and would call time and say, right, I want you lot to go off and have dinner. I want you lot to go and not come back until lunchtime tomorrow. And people are like, no, we've got to keep going. And he, exactly as you were saying, but you're not being effective now. You know, this is the third long day you're doing. There's a point at which I've got to call it and look after you so that you can do more later. So it's sort of self-interest, but it's also caring for them as humans.
I think that's right. You have to keep an eye on, because some people do just have a natural propensity to massively overwork, and then they become less effective and they make mistakes because you're under so much sleep deprivation, time pressure. Way back in the midst of time of my career, I remember when we went out for lunch, we were a bit nervous about taking a bit of time off. We used to leave our jacket on the chair and it's like a warm cup of coffee on our desk, as though it looks as if we just disappeared for a few seconds to go and do something, and then you'd to come back the next day and throw away the cold coffee and put your jacket on again. But that was, again, it was people trying to make sure they had that space, but having to effectively lie about it. Whereas great leaders encourage people to be the best they can be, recognize that that does involve a real commitment, often, hours, but also, a real intensity from time to time. But they also make sure that there's some downtime and that people are looking after themselves properly, because there's nothing worse for a leader than to have members of their team off with stress, burnout, not able to function, and it's because of the way the job was being run.
Very true. I think it's really interesting to hear these perspectives after hearing the coach's side. Olivia, I think we can relate now that there's a lot which can be done to put them to right comfort, the right feel, and right freedom of bringing out their truth. It is not always to be challenged or challenge. It is always to have that environment of openness and I would say fairness to both sides, so that people feel like working and they enjoy what they do, while the pressures and timelines are also taken care of. But one last thought here, and maybe Francesca, you will help us understand, is what exactly go wrong when somebody stand up and say no. Because when we were covering the coaches perspective, I think one thing which came out is that they have this fear of being rejected, they have this fear of getting retaliated. And I myself, in my career span, have faced many such situations where you saying no is taken very negatively, and then you are put to serious repercussions. So what is that which really go wrong when you stood up and you try to bring out your voice?
Yeah, the art of saying no, it is an art, isn't it? And it's how you're saying no and what you're saying no to. Sometimes you must have been in situations where you're all trying to work towards an end game. You definitely need this thing done. There's somebody there who definitely can do that thing. And they just go, no. And you just go, well, we're all working like mad people together, Stan. Explain, what is that about? So there's like a no, which is kind of like, yeah, you get on with it, guys. Good luck with that. I hope you all get a night's sleep. But there's a thoughtful no. And I think the piece there is being comfortable with being able to say no in a thoughtful way. So why are you saying no? What's the rationale to give more than just a straight no? I can't do that because actually I've got this really demanding other project on the go, and this person needs me to deliver on this bit of the project. If we can have a conversation about this whole thing together, then maybe some bits that I can help you with. But if I help you and don't help them, then I'm going to be in a difficult scenario. So how can we make that work? Or actually, I can't do that because I just don't have that skill set. You might think I do, but actually, I think there's somebody else who might be much better at doing it, and I don't want to let you down. That's a very different kind of no to the, oh no, I'm not going to do that. or actually the kind of meek, no, I'm not going to do it, without any explanation. So I think it is about being comfortable to have that maturity of conversation. It's not easy, but I think people respect the fact that you're thinking about it. You're not wanting to let them down, but you're looking at other ways that issue could be resolved. But also you're not just saying no to be difficult. You're saying no because it's the right thing for you to do in the other circumstances that you've got. So not an easy answer to your question, but I think there's a lot there about the circumstances and the reality and the context behind that scenario. And then that takes you back to the boundaries question, is that sometimes you know, I've been in situations where you just kind of keep going on and on and on and on. And sometimes you just have to go, listen, I haven't had a holiday for 7 months. I have to take those 2 weeks up. This is going to get cut right across your project. I'm not going to be around and I can't cancel this holiday. So what else can we do? How can we talk about how we can take that forward? So there are many scenarios that the more detailed answer of a no enables you to have a better outcome.
Olivia, final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, it like so many things, I find it all comes down to communication, both being able to find your voice and also being able to hear someone else's voice and really listen to what they're saying and maybe what they're not saying, and read some cues between the lines, so that the team as a whole has communication. Unfortunately, not enough teams do yet. I think, you know, been in so many teams where there's a surface level, everyone gets along and everyone is fine, but then when push comes to shove, as you were saying, Francesca, it's like, it's a bit every person for themselves. So continuing to communicate and to have each other's backs through the tough times, I think that's a real challenge, and maybe something we can pick up in a later conversation.
Absolutely. So, Francesca, thanks for taking your time out and sharing these insightful perspectives. I'm sure the viewers will get many thoughts in their mind. They will get fresh ideas, and they will also get to reassess themselves in those situations. I think it's very important that what we have experienced is not to be made an experience for others, but we should work on improving their experience out of our learnings. And that's how I think the leaders can really put the right mark on their coaches or their team, and can create the future generation.
Excellent. No, it was a pleasure to talk to both of you.
Great. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Francesca. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks. Bye.